This talk is about Layout Builder. Let's talk about a project that we've been working on for the RISD Museum. And my co-presenter is actually remote. She's on the camera here, and she's provided a couple audio files, so we'll be listening to those as well as she'll be able to chime in when she wants to. And if you have technical questions at the end, she'll probably be the one to answer most of them for me. But I'd like to get started. So my name is Jay Hogue. I'm Director of Design and UX at UMF. I've been working with the web, been a designer for 20 years, been working with the web for about 15. Normally pretty platform agnostic, but for lots of different reasons, the last couple of years I've been focusing a lot on Drupal, focusing a lot on design systems, and that has been my role for this particular project. And Kathy's introduction, been pre-recorded.
Hi everyone, I'm Kathy Beck. I'm a senior UX engineer at UMF. I've been working in Drupal for over 10 years now. As a UX engineer, I'm usually site building and theming Drupal 8 projects. For the past couple of years, I've been digging into all things accessibility. When I'm not working, you can find me listening to audiobooks and hanging out beside cats and
we're going to try to do a mix of live presentation and video with audio. So a few things. UMF, we're headquartered in Providence, but obviously we are a hybrid distributed company, as Claim can tell you, and we are hiring. I would be remiss if I didn't mention that, and we support remote workers as well. So if that's what you're doing, if you're interested, talk to me after the talk. And a few other caveats to get out of the way about this talk in general. So as I mentioned, Kathy is remote. And also, I'm talking about design systems. Design systems are really, they're subject to what problems that you need to solve. Your mileage is going to vary depending on what your project needs are and how you want to go about solving those. So this, I'm not saying that this is the end all be all, everyone needs to do it this way type of design system, but it did work really well for us. And we're trying to come up with a model that we can repeat from one project to another. Ziggurat, which is the name that they've given the platform so far, is also the exception, not the rule. We were really lucky to work with this client. They're a creative client, they're a museum, they're very artistic. They had very few guardrails for us, and that we were super lucky to be able to work in that type of way. It allowed us to work with a lot of cutting edge CSS and JavaScript effects. One of the guardrails that they took down for us that was huge, that I will have to admit is part of this here, is we did not have to worry about IE 11. That opened up a lot of doors, that made things a lot easier. So I will put that out there. This does not support IE 11 fully. And then finally, we're soaking in it. I built the presentation in Layout Builder, in Ziggurat, in the platform that we're using. So everything you're seeing right here is also the platform that we built. And I'm noticing too that my cultural references are probably 20 to 30 years old. So bear with me there. All right, so when I say design system, what do I mean? For us, for this, it's small d, small s system. You've heard of design systems probably if you're in the design world, or even if you're not. IBM has one called Carbon, Salesforce has one. All these large companies have a design system. Their design system helps run every piece of interface they have in their product. Really important for them to have that kind of consistency, to have their development team and their designers work on the same code base, work towards the same goals. That's fantastic. That's not exactly what I'm talking about today. This is small d, small s in the way that we're building something, we're starting from somewhere, we're starting with a design system, but it's not the end-all be-all quite yet. It's not a giant design system as some of these other companies might have. It's platform agnostic. I think the thinking around this really should apply to Drupal, Joomla, WordPress, whatever you want to do. The tool, the platform shouldn't matter, and neither should the tool. Frankly, what I'm talking about now is very similar to what I was talking about a couple years ago with paragraphs instead of Layout Builder. So the tool has changed, but the design system thinking has remained pretty consistent. For this particular project, again, talking about what's a design system, what's not, a familiar paradigm is a template-driven approach versus a component-driven approach. So templates, you know, these are one thing. These are a kit of parts that you can make one thing with. Whereas the component-driven model tries to be little discrete pieces that you can rearrange in any sort of way. They don't always have to be the same. So a similar metaphor would be, you've got a model airplane kit, that's your template. You can only build an airplane with that. You can't build something else with it. Or on the component side, you have Legos, which hopefully you can build anything with, whatever it is you need at that time. So that's what we're sort of talking about here. We're talking about component-driven design systems. To back up a little bit and talk about this project in general, what problem were we trying to solve for the client? And admittedly, they weren't quite sure. When they came to us, they knew they wanted to replicate mostly printed material, printed scholarly publications about exhibitions at the museum. The one that we were looking at was one giant long scrolling page with tons of footnotes, tons of text, tons of references. That's not quite what they wanted to do again. That was applying a very print mindset to the web. And they wanted to start to move away from that. But in the beginning, their heads weren't quite ready for it yet. So we asked a lot of questions and we talked about a lot of things in general and in theory before we built anything. We didn't have a design. What we basically did, the process we followed was our team started to pick apart and extrapolate what we thought a system could be that could support what they were talking about, gave them some wireframes, gave them some suggestions as to how a system could work, and their designers went away and tried to come up with something that could fit that model. And we went back and forth on that a little bit. One of the big things was that they knew for this exhibition they were planning on, the design system was going to be working with artists. And artists are very multimedia, very media rich. So whatever we built wasn't just a print paradigm. It didn't need to just support a lot of text. It needed to support video. It needed to support audio. And later, animation, time became an element here, as well as text content. And then finally, the last two was some future states that we wanted to keep in mind. We didn't want that to hold back the project, but we wanted to make sure we could work towards that. Their future state was, once we get a really great platform, can we open source that? Can we release it to the world so that other museums, other institutions can use that as a publishing platform? For us, selfishly, how can we come up with a design system that is fairly repeatable, that can be a foundation for us from one project to another, to save us a lot of time, get us spun back up, and then we can concentrate more on what makes that design system for that client really specific. So those are all some of the things in the back of our heads. The design that they came back to us with after doing some wireframing and showing them some ideas, I mean, it's not atypical. Big header, big image, there's some text, there's some really great photos that we got to look at all the time. And we talked about, do these autoplay? How do they come into the viewport? Do they stick to the top of the viewport and then another one layers on? The header, can that stick? Can that show progress as you move through the page, etc.? How do we deal with credits? How do we make sure that media and any references we make to outside material can be referenced in a scholarly way? Again, trying to support a museum and the way that they do these sorts of things. And then for me, at the bottom of each one of these long-form chapters, I wanted to make sure we could inject the table of contents. And if you're not just moving through the publication in a linear way from previous to next, can you jump around? Can we reintroduce that table of contents, put that at the end of every chapter so that someone has somewhere to go instead of scrolling way back up to the top? So fairly simple. That's where we were starting. So that's an overview of the approach and the problem we were trying to solve. We came to them and said, we want to use Layout Builder. Now, and we admitted fully, this is the first time we've used Layout Builder, but here's why we think it fits. Here's why we think it would be a good way to solve some of these problems. So hopefully the audio will be good. I'm going to play this video.
Layout Builder became stable with Drupal 8.7. With this being in core, we no longer needed to add contributed modules like panels or display suites to control a page's layout. Here you can see we've enabled 2 core layout builder modules, as well as 2 contributed modules, and added 1 custom module.
So these are like the minimum number of things you have to turn on to get Layout Builder working and to get that to be part of your project. Because it's part of core, it's really easy to integrate that and get up and running with it. And then now we'll show a little bit more about what that will actually...
Is audio not working, Jay?
No, audio's working. I hear you.
We got you.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was playing in the video. I can't hear it, so...
Oh, all right.
It was great.
Yeah, audio's working. So this will show you a little bit more about what you actually get when you turn those things on.
There are 2 key layout builders. The first option doesn't change the site at there. They will still be able to fill in fields and have pages built automatically. The main difference here is for site builders. Layout Builder provides an interface for creating layouts within the managed layout content type. Using Layout Builder should drastically reduce the need to add node templates to control the page's layout.
So what this is getting at is that in most cases, not in our case, but in most cases, it makes more sense to do your site building and do your theming in the admin. You can do so much in the admin already. What Layout Builder gives you is the ability to actually lay out templates, visually lay them out from top to bottom as well as left to right. These templates do not have to be accessed by the author. They can be accessed by the site builder only. They are places where fieldable content can be inserted into a layout. So if you think of an article, a press release, some of these things where the template does not need to change again and again, it's a perfect way to have a visual experience for the site builder, avoid going into changing a lot of twig templates, and let authors just fill in fields. So that is probably the more typical way that a lot of people are using Layout Builder. This project took it that one step further.
With option 2, editors get the ability to override the default layout set up by the site builder. Later in the presentation, Jay is going to show you how to edit the layout of a page as a site editor. But for now, I'm going to go over a couple of configuration settings that will make creating and editing layouts more manageable.
Right.
As you saw earlier, there are 2 contributed modules that we enabled on this project. These were only really needed because we were allowing editors to override that. The first module we're using is Layout Builder Restrictions module. This allows site builders to reduce the number of fields and blocks available to the editor when adding content to Layout Builder. By default, there are a ton of options available to editors, but for this site, we only needed to expose a dozen or so blocks and fields. The second module is the Layout Builder Modal module. This provides a better content entry experience when adding content within the layout.
Right, and so these 2 really helped clean up the editing experience for us and make sure that this now kind of what you see is what you get experience was better for our authors to go in and start to work with. So the paradigm here is that you can set up templates and you have the ability per template to decide, can authors override that default template? Can they really go crazy with it? Or do they stick with it and they don't get to change it at all? That was a powerful thing that Layout Builder was able to give us, but a lot of people also at the same time now are thinking, why not paragraphs? Because that's a viable option as well, and it's been around for a number of years. So for us, we still use paragraphs on some projects. It's still the right decision on some projects. We just happen to think it wasn't the right decision for this one. And there's a couple different reasons. So what paragraphs and Layout Builder do really well together is they both support custom components You can have design systems, you can have a lot of parameters and design options that you can give your authors. You have a lot of control so that they don't go rogue and insert, colors that are way off brand. There's a lot of that support in both of these things. There's a lot of support for rich text and multimedia as well. You can go as crazy as you want to with either of those options. The cons that we've been running into when using paragraphs are a few. They're difficult to translate. You can do it. We have sites that are doing multilingual paragraphs, but it's not a pleasant experience for the author typically. There are performance issues for sure, and other people have talked about that much better than I can, but it basically has to do with entity inception, entities inside entities inside entities, and saving and revisions and a lot of database bloat. But a big one for a creative client like ours was that lack of a Wysiwyg interface. There's no connection, no visual connection between editing a series of paragraphs on a page in the admin versus seeing it on the front end. And right now, we have not seen a great solution that will bridge that gap. Layout Builder right out of the box already does that, and that was a huge advantage for us for this project. And then, paragraphs also, it works with tokens, again, but it doesn't make fieldable content as easy to use as Layout Builder does. Some of the other things that Layout Builder gave us was that template management that I just mentioned. Again, not for this project, but for most other projects, to be able to say, you have a marketing page content type that you can go crazy with, but now everything else is locked away and you can't touch it, could make a lot of sense. Fieldable data is really easy to insert and move around and make part of your content. And then, honestly, it's future-proof because it's in core. Because of that, it feels much better to invest a lot of time and energy learning it, making it better, because it's already been adopted, it's already part of core. Paragraphs is well supported, sure, but it's still a contrib module. So its future, who knows? All right, got a bunch of stuff out of the way. Now let's actually take a tour of the design system we were able to put together. Or not. Hello? All right, never mind. So there's only two content types. This is a pretty simple publication platform again. There's a publication, which to use the book paradigm is our book cover, right? It's got a long title, it's got a short title, it's got a cover image, it's published or not published. There's not that many fields to that content type. But we also have the publications page. So there's a couple more fields there, obviously, but that's where the bulk of the content is going to live for any publication. So that, again, using the book metaphor, is our chapter. So it has a long title, short title. It's got a reference to which publication it's a part of. And it has a bunch of fields for that scholarly data, the media credits, the page credits, the bibliography, endnotes. Citation Info is something else that we learned about. Had no idea what that was, but apparently there's 11 or 12 different styles of citations you can make available. And then Table of Contents. Table of Contents was pretty important to them in the way that it makes or break a publication. It wasn't enough for them to be able to have just one table of content style, although that's all they have right now. We needed the plan for multiple. So we have a number of fields in the table of contents just to make sure that down the road we have all the fields we would want to create a custom table of contents for a new publication. So there's a lot going on under the hood there. Navigation block that you saw a little preview of, that's an interesting one. That's a custom block that we created that an author can put on the page wherever they like, although typically it's either the first thing or the second thing on the page. It uses the short or long title depending on the width of the viewport. We have a previous link, we have a title of the page you're currently looking at, we have a next link, and we have some author controls for that particular page. We wanted to make sure things were accessible, so there's a font resize, there's a print option, again, scholarly publications, and there's a jump link down to a citation block. The cool thing about this was like, it's a view, it's got contextual filters, it's also a menu, and it keeps someone inside the publication that you're actually in pretty well. And that's the way that we were able to make it so that it's a block that they can move around and place, but it's still as powerful as it needs to be. Finally, there's actually the structure of the system itself. When you go in, you saw a little bit about with Kathy's videos, what you get and how you would actually be able to lay stuff out. But we have a number of different options, which you've probably seen in other design systems before. We have the ability to have a single column, big row, and you choose how wide that column is going to be. It doesn't have to be 100%. It can be a small portion of that, and that allows them to design something that has a lot of space to it if they want. These are also a little bit intelligent. So choosing 25% for desktop is not the same as choosing 25% for mobile. It would look really terrible, actually. So we made some internal decisions to allow them to think in a desktop way, but have everything be smart enough for mobile that it looks good. So if I choose 25% for desktop, on mobile it might actually be 50% or a little bit more, because that proportionally will look similar, but it's not mathematically the same.
Did you have other breakpoints besides mobile and desktop?
Yeah, I'm actually going to get to some of those as well. Yeah. We also have, two columns is pretty obvious too. 50-50 is what you would normally want to get with, but we wanted to make sure there was there's multiple choices for that as well. So we're showing here how we have 5 different types of 2-column rows. When we get to 3 columns, same thing. We have the 33, 33, 33, or we have combinations of a 50% column around. And this is where it gets to that multiple breakpoints. This is great for desktop, but what happens for tablet? And we wanted to make sure that it was smart enough that when you choose one of these options, it might look like this for mobile, and then it might change to 50-50 over 100 for tablet, for that in-between, and then finally we can support 25-25-50. All of this stuff is just baked into the way we built the system, not something the author has to think about. They just choose and think about how they want that layout to work for desktop, and it's going to work all the way down to mobile just fine. And that becomes really important because as an author, as a designer, thinking about all the different parameters, all the different ramifications all the time for every viewport can be a real challenge. Alignment. We needed alignment, of course, but it doesn't really show up very much if you're doing single columns. So vertical alignment is possible, but it's really, you're only going to see that if you have more than one column to work with. So whichever one is shorter is going to align according to the one that's taller. That's pretty straightforward. Same thing with horizontal alignment. Only going to really work if you have a single column that's smaller than its row, smaller than its section. But we definitely have to allow for that. We want to make sure someone can shift the column around as they need to. So those options are built in. Now that we've seen a little bit of that, I'll actually show you how it looks in Layout Builder. So here we have clicked on Layout. We're now editing the layout of the presentation that I'm showing you. It's about to get meta in here. And you'll notice, first off, that in Layout Builder, there's section and blocks. Sections are rows. Basically, they span across the entire page. And so when you're in this editing mode, there's a little add section box option between everything. That's how you insert new content between existing content. There's also the add block area. The add blocks can be inside those columns. And the nice thing about blocks is that you can have as many blocks in a column as you want. You're not restricted to one. You can have 2, 3, 4, depending on how you want that layout to work. The other thing we did, I'll say first that once you create a section, it's fairly permanent, but blocks can be moved around. So blocks are nice in that they can be dragged and dropped from one column to another, from one section to another. If you're not traversing too far, it's pretty easy to do. But sections themselves are fairly static. They don't move.
You add attributes to sections like background color or image?
Yeah, we have config for the section, and I'll be showing you that too. The other thing to notice, this was a multimedia-rich site, but animations and stuff happening while you're trying to edit content that's a bad experience. So we ended up stripping that out of the admin experience, shutting those off basically. But I wanted to make sure that an author still understood that they were there. So there's these little labels on the blocks that we've added via CSS to say, you have an effect on this block. That's nice in two ways. It's nice to remember that I did that. It's also nice to say, I added that option, but I don't see it until I publish. Now you'll see a label at least. You'll see something and know that that change has worked. Now we'll go in, we'll configure section. So I click on configure section, and I get all the different options allowed on a section. That horizontal, vertical alignment that I've talked about. We have a lot of background colors here that we've abstracted, added little labels so visually people can see what color they're choosing. There's the layout that I've talked about. The interesting thing here, and if you worked with paragraphs, depending on how you've set up paragraphs, you've worked around this probably. But sections, as far as I can tell, once you've chosen that it's a 2-column section, it's always a 2-column section. So you can change the percentages that maybe the author has given you to change, but I can't easily make it a 3-column section. And I'm not sure why that is. That might be something that's changing, but that's something I've noticed that's different than the stuff that we've set up with paragraphs in the past.
Not that bad. You just create it.
Not that bad. When you can drag and drop visually, it's not that bad. And then we have something called extra. We kind of just lumped a couple special effects into that. There's 2 notable ones. There's sticky mode. So now this section, when it hits the top of the viewport, is going to stay there. It's going to stick there, and other content will come in and scroll on top of it. And then there's hero mode, and that's kind of a design term, but that basically means instead of the content setting the size of that row, the image, the background image will set the size. So if I upload a 16:9 image, that row is going to be 16:9. If it's 21:9, it'll be 21:9. The image will drive the content. That's our hero mode. And then custom class also. We've inserted that on everything because we can't solve for every use case all the time. So giving us or giving them the ability to add a custom class that will drive that row and do something special is great for little one-off solutions. Now, there's a couple options on the block itself. There's style settings, which are, I wish there was a better name for it, but those are basically some of the custom options we've added that will affect the design of that block. But we're going to click on configure right now first. And this is the editing experience that you might expect. We have a title, we have the body, content, text format. We can maybe add a background image depending on what block it is. Pretty typical, except notice for them, again, text-driven, we gave them a ton of CK editor styles to work with. All sorts of things so that they could do a lot of custom design. All right, and now I'll show you the style settings. So the way we've set this up, we use something called the block style plugin, which I'll also show you a little code snippet of. But essentially, it lets us create groups of styles. So we have a couple that are applied here already. We have a custom class, we have an animation as that label suggests, and we have spacing. Those are a few of the things that we've added to that block. I can edit them. If I click on edit, it'll show me what those options were. I can change the animation from one to another. I've got a 12 or 13 or so different animations that are available to me. I can delete one from that list that's been previously applied. And then if I want to add a new one, I can choose something that hasn't already been applied. And these can change contextually per block. So for video, if this was a video block, there's a media player theme option. But you don't see that here because I'm working with a Wysiwyg block. And so these are pretty cool and pretty powerful because we can add as many of these groupings as we want. And a lot of these, all they're really doing for us is adding a custom CSS class around the block wrapper. And we can attach JavaScript events to that or any special styling that we want. The way that looks is, so here's our list of PHP files, one for each of the styles you just saw. And here's some of the code that runs that. All it is, again, is spitting out a custom CSS class. But just by doing that, we get a lot of power, a lot of customization available to us. All right. Now, I'll run through a video real quick of what it looks like to add a new block. And I'll add a video block. So first you add your section. You go in, and you choose 1, 2, 3. And these little visual previews are something as well that Layout Builder allows you to make pretty easily. They're actually, they're like some sort of YAML format. They're not even visual. You pass in a YAML format and it spits out an SVG that creates these things. So that's pretty cool too. We've given them only 3 options right now, but we can add a lot more later on if we want to. So I'm going to choose one column. I'm going to set up my horizontal alignment, pick a background color, go with the default here. I don't need anything extra, and I'll add it. That hasn't really done much now. It's just added an empty section, and that won't even render if there's no block in it. So I'm going to go and add a block. Now, what Kathy showed you earlier, the block restrictions module, helps create this list. So this list can be insane if you don't restrict it. It's like every field that Drupal makes available to you. Here, we wanted to only show the ones that are really relevant for the author. So we've restricted it to this list, which is still fairly lengthy. But these are the fields that are available to the page itself, as well as additional fields that might be available to the entire publication. So they could place any of these blocks anywhere they like, just like a custom block. But what we're going to do now is we're going to click on Custom Block. And here's our list of blocks that are available to the project. Again, fairly simple. We've got a hero, a basic block, an image, a video, audio. Pretty typical, but each one of these things is fairly powerful. So I'm going to choose a video. I get that modal experience. I'm going to add my title. And we're using the media library, so I'll go into the library. I'll upload a new video here. And then once that's uploaded, we have a category that can be added to help make it easier to find these types of things later. There's an optional subtitle, optional poster image if someone wanted to provide an image that's different than the first frame of the video when it first loads. And then there's a modal caption. This is a longer form explanation for when this object is available, like in a full screen mode with a big description. One more thing. So we didn't use this very often, but view modes are available for your content blocks as well. So here, with a video, we set up a few. Most notably, we have the full view and the simple view mode. Simple view mode for us, for video block, meant we would turn on, we would auto mute it, we would turn on auto play, and we'd treat it like a background image, basically. We treat it like an animated GIF. It auto plays when it comes into the viewport, it keeps on playing, and as long as it's muted, it'll work in a lot of mobile devices as well. Or you choose the full mode, and the full mode will give you the controls that we've been seeing. So there's 2 ways that you can take the same video file and apply it maybe in one publication, one way with controls, one way without controls. We're doing that with a view mode. All right, and then that see if I can finish this video. Here, we add the block, and there it is. I'll do one more thing just to demonstrate. I'll go into style settings. We're going to go and we're going to say, I want to customize the spacing. I want to review it and add none. You'll notice the page scrolled up. That's one of the things I kind of hate about Layout Builder right now. It jumps you around a lot. But I'm hoping, again, because this is something that is being newly used quite a bit, that those kinds of kinks will start to work themselves out. So I liked what I did. I'm going to save that layout. And now I've got a new block in my presentation with the video in it. All right? So that's a quick run through of what it is, what we built. But now, what did the client do with it? Why were we so happy with it? So I'll show you some super secret stuff.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Basically, is that a layout term or is that actually mapping back to Drupal blocks?
Yeah, it's confusing. So the question was about the term blocks. There's a layout block, and then there's like your custom block library. They're not the same, and it's an unfortunate terminology to reuse that, but here we are. That's what they did. So the custom blocks in layout are basically a template wrapper, When I create a bunch of paragraphs on this page that are video blocks and image blocks and Wysiwyg blocks, I'm not cluttering up my custom block library. I'm reusing a block as if it's a template to insert content onto the page. So it's a slightly different paradigm.
But they are the same custom blocks. They're just used in different places on the site, and they're stored differently. So the block library is stored as the block library, and inline blocks are stored as content as inline blocks per node.
Right. So again, a little confusing, but that's definitely a thing.
Search that all live on the same page, that's all.
I'm sorry, say that again?
So they're blocks but not.
Yeah, they're blocks, but not.
But they live in that piece of content though, so is that content detectable and searchable?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Really important term.
yes, exactly.
I don't know how anyone's expected to do
Right.
Yeah, so she mentioned inline blocks, and that's a phrase we always really beat in our head. Inline blocks exist on the page, it's a layout builder, were instantiated in the layout builder, and those inline blocks do not appear in the library. So global inline blocks versus global custom blocks. So custom blocks in the library, global inline blocks not.
Right. Yeah. That's good explanation, but again, it's still confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right. All right, so let's see. So there's a few things they're working on. There's one publication that is live right now if you go to publications.risdmuseum.org. But it's not that impressive because it's a compendium, it's a collection of their podcasts, essentially. I hesitate to say audio tour because it feels more like a podcast that you listen to while you walk around the museum. But they have a big exhibition coming up at the end of the year that they're working on called Raid the Icebox, and it's a retrospective of an Andy Warhol installation that was done 50 years ago. This is an anniversary showing of that. So these are some of the things that they created after we trained them. They were trying, admittedly, they said, we were trying to break it. We were trying to figure out where the edges were. So they ended up, what surprised us is that they really ended up leveraging a lot more video than we had expected. So this is an introduction. The hero is a moving video. Then you get into something that's a little bit more typical, more content-based. We've got some, there should be some footnotes here and there. And then things are coming in and out of the viewport as you, well, they're not actually. I'm lying. Let me refresh. A lot of the animations we did fire once. They don't fire every single time the page is loaded, so I probably already looked at this and everything fired, but it's not going to load. All right, maybe not. We'll let that go. Here's an example of that idea of stickiness. Let me scroll back down again. So they did a hero background video. Again, it's auto-playing and everything because they chose that view mode. But then if I'm scrolling, other things are coming in and layering on top. They've got all these posters and context that are happening. Now I can keep going. That scrolls in. We've got a little bit of text that scrolls up. So it's kind of like the scroll bar is the scrubber on a big long play video. And you're controlling the pace, so it feels like time really does enter here as a design element. Because I can scroll through this really quickly, or I can scroll through it really slowly and take my time and learn about what this exhibition is doing, what the importance of it is, etc. So this is one example of something that's a lot more text-heavy. We get down to the bottom. Here's now our table of contents. And so same design system, same set of components. This one has a very different look and feel. This artist was doing something a lot more contemplative. Again, time feels like it's a part of how this story unfolds. This particular one, she wants the user to breathe a certain way, to use this as sort of a meditation. So it feels very different. It's a lot of words still, but it's not quite as scholarly anymore, right?
This is all being designed by the content?
This is being designed by the client, yeah. So I kind of want to reiterate, most of the time you spend a lot of effort making a great design system, you hand it over to the client, you train them, and they still find a way to mess it up. This was the opposite in that we were really surprised with what they were doing with it. They took these kind of simple pieces and made something really much more dynamic than we expected. So this one, again, a much different feel, a lot of the same pieces. I'll move on to this one now, and this is even more video heavy than some of the other ones. But the videos I kind of like because they're slow. They feel like you got to kind of, if you look real quick, you might think it's a still image. But they're moving very slowly, and so they become part of the tone. I'm sorry?
You're ahead of the time, you're slow piece.
Maybe. And so they're doing a lot more. Again, this was a sketch, so the content isn't there yet, but they're doing a lot more layering. Here is a video sticking with another video coming in on top of it. Again, it's slow, so it took me a second or two to realize this is actually a video until she blinks. Then again, there's some content that might come in. Here's another video that comes on top of that. Another story. That one's slowly moving as well. And then this one is kind of very, very like David Lynchian to me. So they took this as an opportunity to say, well, you know, the museum is the best soundstage. We're just going to shoot a bunch of crazy videos in the museum and make that part. This artist wanted to make it part of the story that they wanted to tell. So this is a pretty neat, more media-rich version of the same sort of story. I'm going to wait until there's a creepy rabbit that comes up, which is kind of cool. I don't know why. Yeah, creepy rabbit. So they were experimenting with a lot of that kind of thing. And then finally, this one is really neat. So this is something that's actually going to be published fairly soon. So this one is closer to being done. This has a lot of real content. This goes into the history of why this exhibition is important. That's a much longer form video. This is like a 17-minute video that they put up here. But the cool thing they did was they took this idea of sticky. I'm not a fan of that right now, actually, but they took this idea of stuff that can stick to the top of the viewport, and they started to make it a collage. So things come in, things layer, things stick, some things don't, some things scroll away. So now, like, you're almost making artwork as you're scrolling. You're bringing the story together. And now there's more videos that happen on top of that. Here's, again, is like a look into what happens behind the scenes, what happens behind the storage doors. Yeah?
I'm curious about version control, because you're giving your editors like a lot of,
Yeah.
not only just like content, but it seems like traditionally this would be like configuration management setting. Is that the case here, or is this purely content?
Yeah, it is content. So the question is about version control, and the great thing about the fact that this is Layout Builder in Core is that it has revision history. So every page they create with Layout Builder has revision history on it, so they can do something that they don't like and either manually remove it in the editor or go back a couple steps in the revision history and grab that as well. So that's there. But it does, when I was creating my presentation with this system, one of the things that I really longed for actually was, I gotta get back up now, one of the things I longed for was the ability to duplicate a section and reuse it on the same page, or the ability to duplicate a block and reuse it, because some of these blocks have a lot of little stylistic things you've added to them, and you want to be able to reuse that again and again. That's not easily done right now. So that feels like an opportunity for someone to create a custom module to help do that. Duplicating a page is easy enough, but duplicating a piece of a page still isn't quite yet. So seen a little bit about what they're doing with it. This is a little bit more about what's under the hood, what helped build some of that. So we've mentioned some of these modules already, but patches are also really important because, again, Layout Builder it's not new, but it's newly in heavy use. There's quite a few patches out there that are available. So if you run into something that you feel like is a bug, make sure to check if there's a patch for it already, because someone probably ran into it also. And so it's easy to kind of overlook that and feel like you got to fix something yourself, but typically in this active community, you certainly don't.
I get really nervous when I see 3 or 4 patches because if a hot security fix comes out and those patches don't work with the security fix, then what do you do?
Sure. No, it's true. It's true. And I think that's part of the decision making that needs to go into whether or not you want to use Layout Builder in a particular kind of project. For us, because the content types and everything are so simple here, we felt like if that were to come along, we could probably deal with it. It would certainly be a headache, but it's much better than a site that has a lot of security implications, has a lot of different content types that could really increase the complexity for sure. So, and two, there's 2 things I want to draw attention to. We have, we have a module that we are working on making open source. Basically, it's a way to extend that section configuration that we saw and make that easier for authors to add a lot more options to it. So that's something that we want to contribute back to the community. That's something that we'll be working on for sure. And then part of what's under the hood was a custom view that we built to allow authors to be able to control the order of publications within the order of the chapters within a particular publication. So it's not a menu system per se, it's a view, but it replicates kind of what menus would normally do. Question?
Yeah, I have a question, not necessarily only now, but like specifically,
Yeah.
focus will be to performance and probably bigger accessibility.
Yes, so questions about performance and accessibility generally. So that's a great one. Accessibility as a company is really important to us, and as a museum, it was important to them as well. That's one of the reasons why we kept the custom blocks fairly simple and trying to leverage as many existing technologies as possible. So HTML5 for the video, HTML5 for the audio, because there's a lot of accessibility built in. One of the things that we're definitely going to be supporting down the road will be transcripts for video. When a video is just basically background art, it may not require a transcript, but some of them definitely will. So the ability for them to upload, these are all custom hosted videos. These are not on Vimeo or any external service right now. We're going to reevaluate that for sure, because when we started, we thought a lot of videos would be short, and now quite a few of them are quite long. So we might have a mix of the two. But regardless, they need to be able to support the accessibility that Vimeo would give them for transcripts and for other types of things like that. For performance, we're on Acquia, so that's great. But these pages are long. These pages have a lot of different content blocks and stuff on them, and the video is certainly something that's bogging the site down right now. I will definitely admit that. But that was a conversation we had early on that has shifted now, and we're going to have to shift the technology that supports it so we can get better performance out of it. Yeah.
So when I see sites that have a lot of configuration change, text size, background colors, images, things like that, very rich. How much training went into educating content editors that while you can do this, like don't put a bunch of text overlay on
No, that's interesting. So, right, that opens up a can of worms for sure. So the question was about all the different options that they have in the editor. What's to say they're not going to create something inaccessible? So there's a couple things. So this background color, for example, we've programmed it in. If I don't do anything custom, that text color is going to be whatever is best supported. So there are some automated things happening. If they have one background color that's dark enough to support white text. So we actually flip it for them automatically. We don't we don't say it's on you to make that decision, but they put in, we saw some books floating and then so some text overlap. I can't necessarily stop that from happening. I don't know all the times what they're going to do, but to their credit, they have been really good collaborators and we'll be having conversations in the upcoming weeks, now that they've been working with it for a number of weeks, what they would like additionally that will help make the experience better for reading, or give them additional custom things that we haven't made available to them. So it's kind of a mix of trying to predict how many things they could do poorly and mitigating that, and then figuring out where those edges are right now. Did you have a similar question?
I did, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you use go back to the performance question?
Yeah.
Front end. Did you use a particular front end framework or tooling to provide the transitions, or was it all just custom JavaScript stuff?
So the question about tooling and our frameworks that we're building on. So we threw out the CSS that Layout Builder gives you automatically because it didn't make a lot of responsive decisions for us. But that was fairly easy because with Flexbox and things, you can build that from scratch pretty quickly. So we ended up doing a lot more custom code than we did framework code. However, there is Bootstrap in here as well. And that's mainly because of that custom field. There's a bunch of great utilities that Bootstrap gives us and gives them, and when they really need to do that one little thing. And we turned a lot of those on. I ended up turning a lot of other stuff off so we wouldn't get a lot of cruft. But the utility classes like that, the fact that there's great documentation on it, made it really easy to say, when you're stuck and you want to do something custom, go see if there's a utility for it first. You might be able to solve your problem that way. But as far as JavaScript goes, it's Drupal, so it was easy to include jQuery. I think we ended up not using it very much though, and we might end up taking it out. And because we built it in an integrated way, what I tried to do, if there's one event listener that's looking for scroll, looking for what's in the viewport, I tried to do as many things inside that as possible. So there might be an opportunity later to autoplay a video when it comes into the viewport. I can hook that right into the same listener, so we don't have a number of different listeners doing the same thing. We did try as much as we could to find efficiencies like that in these components. Yeah.
It looked really snappy and responsive.
It is fairly smooth, yeah. And I credit some of that maybe to Layout Builder because the markup is fairly lean. You're able to go in and just like paragraphs, but you're able to make sure that those templates have exactly what you want inside of them. There's not that much cruft in there. If you put in a little bit of extra work to make sure that happens. So the markup is fairly lean, and then because we had complete control over the theme, we tried to keep that lean as well. Kathy?
Something to note is that we themed off as stable and not classy, so we didn't have a lot of markup and a lot of trust in our HTML anyways, so that kind of helped with injecting our custom classes and not having to strip out too much that came with classes.
Definitely. You have a question? Go ahead. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to put some of these things up here too. It's not perfect. Layout Builder definitely does have some gotchas. The responsive column thing that I mentioned. And then the idea that in the admin now, you are kind of blending two different things. You're blending your front end now and your back end. So it's not necessarily a problem, but it's something to note. If you're going to quote a project on working with Layout Builder, no, you should put in some hours to make sure that your admin code and your front end code don't clash and don't create a mess, basically. So that's not something we've seen with paragraphs necessarily, but something that's definitely present for Layout Builder itself. And there's little annoyances here, like you saw in one of the videos, but I want to try to think about it as a glass half full situation where these are ways that we can get involved to make it better. If there's something that annoys you, it probably annoys other people. So maybe someone's already working on a fix for that kind of thing. And then, yeah, keep your eye out for patches. Really quickly, our future with Layout Builder, we really liked it for this project, so we are already using it in another project. We're using it in that more typical fashion, though, where there's going to be a lot of templates that are locked down for the editor not to be able to touch, but just to add fieldable content to. But it does, Layout Builder has the power to create new custom blocks that this project didn't need. One great example is you can create a configurable view block that someone can place on the page. So they can place something that says, give me the latest 4 blog posts from this category. And now they have a marketing page with a bunch of custom content on it, but also some dynamic content on it as well. So that makes for a real powerful experience in the admin. And then, there's some internal conversations too. We want to be able to make this as portable as possible. It's a little bit easier because not so much of this lives in config as it does with paragraphs, to be able to port your theme and your layout instructions and your custom options from one project to another. So that is a benefit that we're trying to explore further. And then I've got that module that I mentioned, and this idea of can we duplicate? Can we do other things to help enhance the experience? And finally, the future for the RISD Museum with it. So like I said, there's one publication that's live now. There's some of these other chapters that they're working on that will be coming online in the fall. And they're already talking internally with the larger RISD education community about using the platform for other things. Instead of publications, can it be departments and department pages? And so they have this flexibility, but they're still within a framework so that they can't completely break stuff and go rogue, which typically happens in a university setting. And our plan is to continue to add and make this more customizable. One of the big things we started with that we don't actually have any code for yet was on a publication-to-publication basis, can I change out the font? Can I change the typography completely so that it has a very different look and feel now? Instead of a sans serif as a primary, maybe it's a serif, maybe it's something else. And then can they change color palettes? So that's why the color palette naming convention is really abstract right now, because color 1 in this publication might not be color 1 in some other publication in the future. So I imagine a config page on the publication content type that will have these options in there and allow them to pass in new values and hopefully make it hard for them to do something stupid, right? And that is it. We've gotten some questions in and out as we've went along, but are there additional questions you guys would like answered?
How do you deal with SEO? Is it like panels where you have to go to each custom page?
So SEO, yeah, we haven't had to do that very much, honestly, because this is a museum publication, but I'm sure that's going to come up. Kathy, do you have anything to add about that?
I didn't hear the full question in its entirety.
Oh, sorry. The question was generally about how do you deal with SEO, or have we dealt with SEO yet for these pages?
We haven't, but they are just Drupal pages, so we can dig deeper. Well, we have meta tags and we have our XML sitemap out there, but besides that, it could include all the meta tags for Twitter cards and Open Graph and stuff like that.
Yeah,
I don't see why it wouldn't.
The nice thing there is that the publication and the publication page still have a number of fields to them that are available for this type of thing. So we don't always have to traverse into the layout itself to get the title or the content or the important piece of content. If we needed to add additional fields for SEO to that content type, we could certainly do that as well. Yeah.
Yeah, so the layout is associated with a content type node.
I don't think so.
Kind of reconcile panels is kind of like fully separate from nodes.
Right. No, it's not totally separate from nodes. No. So I think it makes it easier to add those additional fields or to use a module to do the meta tag sort of field stuff. Yeah. Yeah. Anything else, anyone? Because we're at time. All right. Cool. Thank you.